Now, let's begin. The North Atlantic had a particular smell at 3 in the morning, salt, diesel, and the metallic tang of steel grinding against itself. Dale Vasquez stood on the derrick floor of the Tempest Runner, watching his crew wrestle with a stubborn drill string, when his satellite phone vibrated against his chest. In 16 years of offshore work, he'd learned that calls at this hour meant two things: equipment failure or family emergency. The display showed a Maryland area code he didn't recognize. Vasquez. Mr. Vasquez, this is Dr. Adriana Short from Baltimore Mercy Hospital. Your son Cameron was brought in approximately 2 hours ago. He's stable, but... Dale's hand tightened around the phone. What happened? Severe trauma. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, facial contusions. A jogger found him in a drainage ditch off Route 40. Mr. Vasquez, the injuries are consistent with... A weak voice cut through the background noise. Dad! Cameron's voice was barely audible, wet and strained. Dad, you there? I'm here, Cam. I'm here. Stepdad did it. The words came out in a whisper, each syllable clearly painful. Don't tell Mom. Please. He said he'd. A cough, then silence. Cameron? Cameron. Dr. Short came back on the line. He's okay. Just experiencing some pain. Mr. Vasquez, we need to discuss his treatment I'm 150 miles offshore. I'll be there as fast as I can get there. Dale disconnected and stood motionless for 3 seconds, processing. His 14-year-old son, Clyde McIntyre, had put his hands on Cameron. Clyde, the assistant manager at some car dealership, the man Shelby had been seeing for 8 months before she'd asked for the divorce. The divorce Dale had signed because he'd been tired of fighting, tired of being the bad guy, for working the rotations that kept their house paid off and Cameron's college fund growing. Bernard Ibarra, the rig manager, appeared beside him. Bernard had worked offshore longer than Dale had been alive, a weathered Venezuelan who'd survived 3 hurricanes and a platform fire. He looked at Dale's face and asked no questions. How fast can we get a helicopter out here? Coast Guard Station is in Elizabeth City. In this weather. Bernard checked his watch. For hours if we're lucky. What happened? My son's in the hospital. Critical condition. Bernard pulled out his radio. I'll make the call. Go pack your gear. 20 minutes later, Dale stood in his quarters, throwing essentials into a duffel bag. His hands moved mechanically. Clothes, documents, wallet. His mind was already 300 miles away, calculating. The helicopter would land at the hospital's helipad. From there, he'd need a car. He'd need information. He'd need to see Cameron, assess the damage himself, hear the full story. Don't tell Mom. That meant Shelby either didn't know or was complicit. The thought made something cold and sharp form in Dale's chest. He'd met Shelby when he was 23, fresh off his first offshore rotation with money in his pocket and no sense in his head. She'd been beautiful, sharp-tongued, ambitious. They'd gotten married 6 months later. Cameron arrived a year after that. The marriage had lasted 13 years before the cracks became canyons. Dale's rotation schedule, 3 weeks on the rig, 2 weeks home, meant he missed school plays, parent-teacher conferences, baseball games. Shelby resented his absence. Dale resented her resentment. They communicated through arguments and silence until finally, she'd sat him down 8 months ago and said she'd met someone. Clyde's good with Cameron, she'd said. He's there. You never are. Dale had signed the papers because fighting seemed pointless. He kept paying the mortgage on the house in Baltimore County, kept Cameron on his insurance, kept sending money for anything the kid needed. Cameron spent alternating weekends with him when Dale was stateside, and they'd talk on the phone every few days. The kid had seemed okay with the arrangement. Quiet, maybe, but Cameron had always been quiet. Now Dale realized what he'd missed. Bernard knocked on the doorframe. Helicopters inbound. 20 minutes. Weather's marginal, but they'll make it work. He paused. Dale, I've known you a long time. Whatever you're thinking, think it through. I'm thinking my son's in a hospital bed because someone decided to use him as a punching bag. I know. Just think it through. The helicopter ride was a blur of rotor noise and darkness. The Coast Guard pilot, a woman named Commander Jan Connor, didn't ask questions either. She'd seen the manifest, seen family medical emergency, and pushed the Sikorsky as hard as safety allowed. They made landfall at 0630, the sun just beginning to burn through the coastal fog. Baltimore Mercy Hospital rose from the gray morning like a concrete monument. Dale walked through the emergency entrance, still wearing his steel-toed boots and oil-stained jacket, ignoring the looks from staff and visitors. A nurse directed him to the ICU on the 4th floor. Dr. Short met him outside Cameron's room. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes and coffee-stained scrubs. Mr. Vasquez, Cameron's resting. We've got him on oxygen for the punctured lung, pain management for the ribs. The facial injuries look worse than they are, mostly bruising and one cut that required stitches. Can I see him? Of course. But Mr. Vasquez, I have to ask, Cameron's mother hasn't arrived yet. We've called her multiple times. Is there something we should know about the family situation? I'll handle it. Cameron looked small on the hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and 4 lines. His face was a canvas of purple and black bruises, one eye swollen shut. Dale's hand found the bed rail and gripped it hard enough to hurt. Cameron's good eye opened. Dad. Hey, Cam. Dale moved to the bedside, careful not to jostle anything. How you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. A weak attempt at a smile, then a wince. Tell me what happened. I shifted away. It's complicated. Complicated is what I deal with for a living. 3-ton drill pipes in 40-foot seas. That's complicated. This is simple. Someone hurt you. I need to know who and why. The door opened behind them. Dale turned to see Shelby Vasquez standing in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. She was still beautiful. Dark hair, sharp features, but she looked older than her 37 years. Behind her stood Clyde McIntyre. Clyde was everything Dale had expected. Mid-40s, soft around the middle, cologne commercial handsome with perfect hair and teeth too white to be natural. He wore an expensive polo shirt and had his hand on Shelby's shoulder in a proprietary way that made Dale's jaw tighten. Dale, Shelby said, they told me you were here. How did you? Coast Guard helicopter. Dale's eyes never left Clyde. Turned out to be faster than driving from wherever you were. We were at Clyde's parents' place in Annapolis. I didn't have my phone on. They called Clyde's cell, and we came straight here. That right. Dale turned back to Cameron. Tell your mother what you told me. Cameron's eye widened slightly. Dad, tell her. The silence stretched. Shelby looked between her son and ex-husband, confusion creasing her forehead. Clyde shifted his weight, and Dale caught it. The tiniest flinch, the way his hand dropped from Shelby's shoulder. Cameron, baby, what's he talking about? Shelby moved to the other side of the bed. Nothing. I fell. I was riding my bike and... You told the doctor someone did this to you, Dale said quietly. You told me who. Now tell your mother. Clyde stepped forward. Look, Dale, I know you're upset, but Cameron already explained to the police. It was an accident. He took a spill on his bike, hit a curb. Shut up. Dale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words hung in the sterile air like a threat. Dale. Shelby's voice was sharp. You don't get to come in here and... Cameron. Dale kept his eyes on his son. Yes or no? Did Clyde McIntyre put you in this hospital bed? The monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, an intercom called for a doctor. Cameron looked at his mother, then at Clyde, then back at his father. Yes. Shelby gasped. Clyde's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on concerned confusion. Cameron, buddy, we talked about this. You know that's not. He's been hitting me for 3 months, Cameron said, the words coming faster now. Started with slaps when I talked back. Then punches. Last night, I told him I was going to tell you, Dad, when you got back on shore. He said he'd kill me if I did. Said he'd make it look like an accident. So he drove me out to Route 40, beat me up, and dumped me in that ditch. Cameron, that's insane, Clyde said, but his voice had gone thin. Shelby, you know I would never. Shelby's face had gone white. Is this true? Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to know. You seemed happy, and I thought maybe I could just handle it until Dad came back. You thought you could handle being beaten? Dale's voice was still quiet, but something in it made everyone in the room go still. You're 14 years old. Mr. Vasquez, Dr. Short had appeared in the doorway. I need to ask everyone except immediate family to step outside. I'm immediate family, Clyde said. I'm his stepfather. No, Dale said. You're not. The divorce isn't final. Legally, Shelby and I are still married, which makes you nobody. Dr. Short checked a tablet. He's right. Mr. McIntyre, you'll need to wait in the family area. Clyde looked at Shelby. Shell, you're not buying this, are you? The kid's obviously trying to get attention, playing you two against each other. Get out, Shelby whispered. What? Get out. She screamed it, and Clyde stumbled backward, shocked. Get out before I call security. Clyde's expression hardened. He looked at Dale, and in that moment, Dale saw the truth of it. The calculation, the contempt, the absolute certainty that he'd get away with it. Then Clyde turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Dr. Short checked Cameron's monitors. His vitals are elevated. Everyone needs to calm down, or I'm clearing the room entirely. I'm calm, Dale said. And he was. The cold thing in his chest had settled into something solid and purposeful. Shelby, you need to hear the rest of this. Cameron, tell her everything. Over the next 20 minutes, Cameron laid it out. The first slap had come when he'd gotten an AC on a math test. Clyde had said it was discipline, that Dale clearly hadn't been around to teach the boy responsibility. The punches started when Cameron had talked back, defending his father. Clyde had been careful, body shots, places that wouldn't show. He told Cameron that if he said anything, he'd make sure Dale never saw him again, that he had lawyer friends who could make it happen. Last night, Cameron had finally worked up the courage to call his father's satellite phone. Clyde had caught a mid-dial, smashed the phone, and dragged him out to the car. He kept saying, I was ungrateful, Cameron said, his voice barely above a whisper. That Mom was finally happy, that I was going to ruin everything because I was a spoiled brat who couldn't handle real discipline. Then he drove out to Route 40 and he trailed off. Shelby was crying silently, her hand over her mouth. Dale stood perfectly still, processing planning. I'm calling the police, Shelby finally said. No. Dale's voice cut through her grief. What? Dale, he nearly killed our son. I know what he did. And the police will take a report, and Clyde will get a lawyer, and Cameron will have to testify, and it'll drag out for months. Best case scenario, Clyde gets probation and a restraining order. Worst case, his lawyer tears Cameron apart on the stand, and Clyde walks free. So what are you suggesting? Dale looked at his son, then at his wife. I'm suggesting you take Cameron home when the doctors release him. File for that final divorce. Get a restraining order to keep Clyde away. And let me handle the rest. Handle it how? You don't want to know. Shelby searched his face. They've been married 13 years. She knew exactly what kind of man Dale was. The kind who fixed problems, who didn't leave things unfinished, who kept his word even when it cost him. Dale, if you do something stupid, I'm not going to do anything stupid. But Clyde McIntyre is going to learn that some things have consequences. Dr. Short cleared her throat. Mr. Vasquez, I should mention that we're required to report suspected abuse to the authorities. That report has already been filed. Good, Dale said. Let them do their investigation. In the meantime, I need to make some calls. He kissed Cameron's forehead, squeezed Shelby's shoulder, and walked out of the hospital room with his phone already in his hand. The first call went to Bernard Ibarra on the Tempest Runner. Bernard, I need a favor. Remember that situation with the Alvarez brothers 3 years ago? I remember. Bernard's voice was cautious. I need you to make some calls. Find out everything about a man named Clyde McIntyre. Where he works, where he lives, who he knows, who he owes. Everything. Dale, I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Just information. Can you do it? A long pause. I'll make some calls. The second call went to Jack Jenkins, Dale's former crew chief who'd left the offshore life 2 years ago to run a private security firm in Virginia. Jack specialized in the kind of security work that didn't appear on official contracts. Jack, it's Dale. I need your expertise on something. Talk to me. Dale laid out the situation in brief, clinical terms. Jack listened without interruption. And you want what exactly? Jack asked when Dale finished. I want to make him understand what he did. I want consequences that stick. Consequences that stick usually means crossing lines. I'm aware. How far are you willing to go? Dale thought about Cameron's face, the bruises, the fear in his son's eyes. As far as it takes. I'll be in Baltimore tomorrow. We'll talk then. The third call went to someone Dale hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Stuart Roberson, his former attorney who'd handled his first divorce filing before Dale had withdrawn it. Stuart had a reputation for being ruthless and thorough. Dale Vasquez, didn't expect to hear from you. I need the divorce finalized. Fast as legally possible. And I need documentation establishing sole custody of my son. What's the situation? Dale explained. Stuart was silent for a moment. I can have the emergency custody order filed by tomorrow morning. The divorce will take longer, but I can expedite it. And Dale? Document everything. Pictures of Cameron's injuries, medical reports, witness statements. Build the case airtight. Already on it. Dale stood in the hospital parking garage, looking out over Baltimore as the sun climbed higher. Somewhere in this city, Clyde McIntyre thought he was safe. Thought he could talk his way out of this. Charm his way back into Shelby's good graces. Maybe even convince her that Cameron was lying. Clyde didn't know that Dale had spent 16 years in one of the most dangerous industries in the world, surrounded by men who solved problems with their hands and their minds. Didn't know that Dale had connections stretching from the Gulf Coast to the North Sea, men who owed him favors and men who'd work for the right price. Most importantly, Clyde didn't know what was coming. Dale's phone buzzed. A text from Bernard. Started making calls. Should have something by tonight. Another text, this one from Jack. Talked to a friend at Baltimore PD. McIntyre has a record. Sealed juvenile file. 2 domestic violence calls from an ex-girlfriend that never went anywhere. He's done this before. Dale saved the message and headed back inside. He had a son to sit with and a plan to formulate. The next 48 hours moved with the deliberate precision of a drilling operation. Dale checked into a hotel near the hospital, spending his days with Cameron and his nights assembling information. Bernard's contacts in the maritime industry proved surprisingly useful. One of the rig workers had a brother who worked at the DMV, another had a cousin in the Baltimore County Property Records office. By Thursday evening, Dale had a complete picture of Clyde McIntyre's life spread across his hotel room desk. Clyde worked at Premier Auto Sales in Towson, where he was assistant manager with a track record of inflating commissions and skimming off trade-in values. He had 2 previous domestic violence accusations that had been settled quietly. One from an ex-girlfriend 7 years ago, another from a woman he dated briefly 2 years ago. Both had dropped charges after receiving cash settlements and signing NDAs. He lived in a rented townhouse in Hunt Valley, drove a leased BMW, and was deeply in debt. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans from shady lending companies, gambling debts to a local bookie named Angelo Marshall. The gambling connection interested Dale. Angelo Marshall ran betting operations out of a bar in Fells Point, with ties to organized crime in Philadelphia. Owing money to Angelo was a dangerous business. Jack Jenkins arrived Thursday night, meeting Dale in his hotel room. Jack looked exactly as Dale remembered. 50 years old, built like a fire hydrant, with cold eyes and scarred knuckles. So, Jack said, studying the information spread across the desk. You want him gone, or you want him to suffer? I want him to understand what he did. I want him to feel what Cameron felt. There are legal ways to make that happen. Legal ways take time and might not work. I need something certain. Jack picked up a photograph of Clyde leaving his dealership. Okay, let's talk options. They talked for 3 hours. Jack laid out various scenarios, each with its own risks and rewards. Physical confrontation was tempting but risky. Dale could end up arrested, and that wouldn't help Cameron. Destroying Clyde financially was possible, but slow. Leveraging the gambling debts was interesting but unpredictable. What you need, Jack finally said, is a situation where Clyde destroys himself, where every choice he makes leads him deeper into the hole, until he's so buried he can't climb out. I'm listening. His weak points are ego, greed, and desperation. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. He needs money badly, and he's already in debt to dangerous people. We use all 3. They worked through the night, building a plan that was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its execution. By dawn, they had something workable. Friday morning, Dale visited Cameron in the hospital. The doctors were optimistic. The punctured lung was healing. The ribs would mend. Cameron would be discharged Monday with follow-up care and physical therapy. "Dad," Cameron said as Dale was leaving, "what are you going to do? What needs to be done?" "That's not an answer." Dale sat back down. "Cameron, I need you to understand something. What Clyde did to you, that can't go unpunished. Not just because of what he did, but because if men like him don't face consequences, they do it again. To someone else's kid. To someone else's family. So you're going to hurt him. I'm going to make sure he pays for what he did. How that looks depends on the choices he makes. Dad, I don't want you to go to jail because of me." Dale squeezed his son's hand. "I'm not going to jail. Trust me." That evening, Phase 1 of the plan went into motion. Jack Jenkins walked into Premier Auto Sales, presenting himself as James Mitchell, a wealthy businessman looking to buy a fleet of vehicles for his security company. Clyde, desperate for a big commission, took the bait immediately. Jack, as James Mitchell, was generous with hints about his wealth. He flashed a Rolex, mentioned properties in 3 states, and casually dropped that he needed to liquidate some assets quickly to fund the vehicle purchase. Clyde's eyes lit up with predatory interest. Over drinks at an upscale bar, James mentioned he had access to shipping containers of high-end electronics coming through the Baltimore port. Slightly irregular, gray market stuff, but legal enough if you didn't ask too many questions. Could be sold for a significant profit to the right buyers. Clyde, already calculating, asked how much investment it would take to get in on the action. $50,000 for a container, Jack said. Flip it for $150. Week turnaround. It was a classic con, and Clyde walked right into it. He didn't have $50,000, but he knew someone who could get it. Angelo Marshall, the bookie he already owed $30,000. Saturday, Clyde approached Angelo with the proposal. Angelo, who'd been briefed by Jack and paid handsomely for his cooperation, expressed interest. He'd front the $50,000 if Clyde could provide collateral and a cut of the profits. Clyde put up the title to his BMW and a lien against his future commissions. Angelo made a show of deliberating, then agreed. The container was scheduled to arrive Tuesday. Payment due immediately. Clyde was ecstatic. This would solve all his money problems. Maybe even let him win Shelby back with a grand gesture. He had no idea the container didn't exist. Monday, Cameron was discharged from the hospital. Dale drove him home to the house in Baltimore County, where Shelby had already moved Clyde's belongings to the curb. The restraining order was in place. Stuart Roberson had filed the expedited divorce paperwork. "Are you staying?" Cameron asked as they pulled into the driveway. "For a while. I talked to Bernard. I'm taking a month of leave from the rig." Cameron's face brightened for the first time in days. "Really? Really? Someone needs to teach you how to throw a proper punch. Can't you getting beat up by every idiot with a temper." Tuesday arrived. Clyde showed up at the designated warehouse with Angelo and 2 of his enforcers. Jack Jenkins was there, looking somber. "We have a problem," Jack said. "The container got seized by customs. Some kind of random inspection. The whole shipment's gone." Clyde's face went white. "What? But the money is gone. I'm out my connection fee. You're out your investment. That's the risk with gray market goods." Angelo Marshall stepped forward. "So let me understand this. I fronted $50,000 based on your guarantee, and now you're telling me that money's just gone." "It's not my fault," Clyde stammered. "It was a legitimate deal. Customs just... I don't care about customs. I care about my $50,000. Plus the $30,000 you already owe me. That's $80,000, Clyde." Angelo's voice was pleasant, which somehow made it more threatening. "When can I expect payment?" I need some time. I can get it. I just need... You have 1 week. After that, I start taking payment in other ways." Clyde stumbled out of the warehouse, his world collapsing. He put up his car as collateral, which Angelo would seize. He had no savings, no way to get $80,000 in a week. He tried to call Shelby. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried to go to the house, restraining order. He tried to explain to his boss at the dealership what had happened. The boss, who'd already been contacted by Stuart Roberson regarding Clyde's commission skimming, fired him on the spot. By Wednesday, Clyde was desperate. He couldn't go to the police. Jack had made sure to keep everything technically legal, just a bad business deal. He couldn't run. Angelo had connections everywhere. He tried to borrow money from friends, family, anyone he could think of. No one would touch him. Thursday, Angelo's enforcers came for the BMW. Clyde watched from his townhouse window as they towed it away. Friday, Dale received a call from Stuart Roberson. "You're going to love this. Clyde's lawyer contacted me. He wants to negotiate the divorce terms. Apparently, his client is willing to accept whatever terms you propose if we can expedite the process." What changed? He's broke, desperate, and facing serious problems with some loan sharks. He needs the divorce finalized, so he can't be connected to you or Shelby legally when things get worse for him. Tell him we'll expedite. But Cameron gets a statement from Clyde, in writing, admitting what he did. Done. Saturday, Clyde sat in Stuart Roberson's office, signing document after document. The written confession about abusing Cameron. The final divorce papers. A legally binding agreement never to contact the Vasquez family again, with violations resulting in immediate arrest and prosecution. Clyde's hands shook as he signed. "You did this," he said to Dale, who sat across the table watching. "Somehow, you orchestrated all of this." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Dale said calmly. "You made a series of bad decisions. You beat a child. You made shady business deals. You borrowed money from dangerous people. All I did was make sure my son was safe. I know you're behind this." The business deal, Angelo suddenly calling in the debts. Prove it. Clyde couldn't, of course. Every piece of the plan had been constructed with plausible deniability. Jack Jenkins was a ghost, his James Mitchell identity untraceable. Angelo Marshall had legitimate grievances. The gambling debts were real. "What happens now?" Clyde asked, his voice hollow. "That depends on you," Dale said. "You have a week to settle your debts with Angelo. I suggest you figure something out." Clyde left the office a broken man. Dale watched him go, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Sunday, Dale took Cameron to breakfast at their favorite diner. The kid was moving better, the bruises fading to yellow and green. "Clyde came by the house last night," Cameron said quietly. "Mom called the cops. They arrested him for violating the restraining order." "I heard. Dad, is this over?" "For us? Yes. For Clyde." Dale shrugged. "He's got some debts to pay. What happens next is up to him." 2 weeks later, Dale received word through Jack Jenkins. Clyde McIntyre had left Baltimore, skipping out on Angelo Marshall's money. Angelo's people had caught up with him in Philadelphia. Clyde was alive, but would be working off his debt for the foreseeable future in one of Angelo's more unpleasant business operations. He'll be cleaning out septic systems for Angelo's construction company, Jack reported. 80-hour weeks, minimum wage, every penny going toward his debt. Angelo figures it'll take him about 5 years to work it off. 5 years of manual labor, Dale said. Sounds like he got off easy. Angelo also made sure word got around about why Clyde owes him the money. Men who beat children don't have an easy time in that world. Dale thought about Cameron, who was back in school, attending therapy sessions, learning to trust again. Thought about Shelby, who'd apologized 1,000 times for not seeing what was happening. Thought about the divorce, now final, and the custody arrangement that gave Dale significantly more time with his son. Thanks for your help, Jack. Anytime. That kid of yours is lucky to have you. Dale returned to the Tempest Runner after his month of leave. Bernard Ibarra met him on the derrick floor, studying his face. Everything's settled? Bernard asked. Everything's settled. Good. We got a well that needs drilling, and you've got a lot of lost time to make up. Dale grinned. Let's get to work. But the story didn't end there. It ended 3 months later, when Cameron called his father's satellite phone during a rotation. Dad, you'll never believe this. Clyde's in the news. What happened? He got arrested. Apparently, he tried to run from Angelo's people, got caught, and in the process of trying to get away, he assaulted someone. There was a video. Now he's looking at real prison time. Dale listened as Cameron recounted the story, hearing the relief in his son's voice. Clyde McIntyre had sealed his own fate, just as the plan had intended. Every choice leading to the next. Every decision compounding until there was no way out. Dad, Cameron's voice was tentative. Thank you for coming back. For everything. That's what fathers do, Cam. We protect our kids. I know. But not every kid has a dad like you. Dale stood on the derrick floor, looking out at the endless Atlantic. The rig hummed beneath his feet, solid and reliable. In 2 weeks, he'd rotate back to shore, back to Cameron, back to building the relationship they should have had all along. Clyde McIntyre had thought he had time to run, had thought he could charm his way out, threaten his way out by his way out. He'd been wrong on every count. Because Clyde had never understood the most important thing. When you hurt someone's child, you don't just face the father's anger. You face his patience, his planning, his absolute unwillingness to let you walk away unpunished. Dale had learned that lesson on oil rigs in the middle of the ocean. Some problems solve themselves if you set the pieces in motion correctly. All you need is patience, precision, and the absolute certainty that you're in the right. The helicopter had been coming. It had been carrying something Clyde McIntyre never anticipated. Not just a father's rage, but a father's calculated, methodical determination to see justice done. And in the end, justice had been served cold, complete, and utterly inescapable. Epilogue. 1 year later, Dale stood in the bleachers of Cameron's high school baseball field, watching his son pitch. Cameron had grown 3 inches, filled out with muscle from physical therapy and training. The bruises were long gone, but the scars remained, not physical ones, but the kind that made you stronger, wiser, more careful. Shelby sat next to Dale, their relationship rebuilt into something different, but functional. They weren't married anymore, but they were partners in raising their son. She'd apologized so many times Dale had finally told her to stop. What mattered was moving forward. Cameron struck out the final batter. The team erupted in celebration. As Cameron jogged off the field, he looked up at the bleachers and found his father's eyes. Dale gave him a thumbs up. After the game, they went for pizza, Dale, Cameron, and Shelby. It felt normal, comfortable, like a family that had survived a storm and come out stronger on the other side. Mom wants to talk to you about something, Cameron said, looking between his parents. Shelby cleared her throat. I've been seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, but I wanted you both to know. He's a teacher at Cameron's school. Good guy. Very different from. She trailed off. From Clyde, Cameron finished. It's okay, Mom. You can say his name. Dale met Shelby's eyes. Just be careful. I will. And Dale? Cameron told me what you want to do. I think it's a good idea. Cameron grinned. Dad's thinking about taking a job as a consultant. Less time offshore, more time on land. He'd be in Baltimore most of the year. Bernard's been pushing me to move into management, Dale explained. Train new crews, oversee safety protocols. It pays less, but I'd be home. I think that's wonderful, Shelby said softly. That night, driving Cameron back to Shelby's house, the kid turned to his father. Whatever happened to Clyde? I heard he's in prison. 18 months for assault. Another 3 years tacked on for fraud charges related to his work at the dealership. He'll be out when he's 50. Do you ever think about him? No, Dale said honestly. I don't waste energy on people who aren't worth it. But you spent all that time planning what happened to him. That wasn't about him. That was about you. About making sure he couldn't hurt you again, couldn't hurt anyone else's kid. Once that was done, he stopped matching. Cameron was quiet for a moment. I used to be angry at you for being gone so much. I know, but when you came back that night, when you dropped everything and got on that helicopter, I realized you'd always been there, even when you weren't physically there. You were out there working so I could have everything I needed. And when I really needed you, you moved heaven and earth to get to me. Dale's throat tightened. You're my son, Cam. You'll always be my first priority. They pulled into Shelby's driveway. Before Cameron got out, he turned and hugged his father. A real hug, the kind they hadn't shared since Cameron was small. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kid. Dale watched Cameron walk to the house, saw Shelby open the door and pull their son into her own embrace. He thought about Clyde McIntyre, working off his debts in some Philadelphia industrial site, facing the consequences of his actions. He thought about Angelo Marshall, who'd gotten his money and a worker he could exploit for years. He thought about Jack Jenkins, who'd pulled the whole thing together with the precision of a surgical strike. But mostly, he thought about the look on Cameron's face when he'd struck out that final batter. Pure joy, untainted by fear or pain. That was worth everything. Dale pulled out of the driveway and headed back to his hotel. Tomorrow, he'd call Bernard and accept the management position. He'd sign a lease on an apartment in Baltimore. He'd start building the life he should have been living all along. The helicopter had come. It had brought justice, retribution, and a father's love, all wrapped into one package. And Clyde McIntyre, wherever he was tonight, would carry the weight of that lesson for the rest of his life. Some debts, Dale knew, could never truly be repaid. But watching them try was satisfaction enough. He thought back to that moment on the rig, holding the satellite phone, hearing his son's broken whisper, "Stepdad did it. Don't tell Mom." Clyde McIntyre had bet that distance would protect him, had bet that Dale was too far away, too occupied, too disconnected to be a real threat. Clyde had lost that bet, and in losing, he'd learned the hard truth that Dale had known all along. A father's love knows no distance, recognizes no obstacles, and accepts no excuses. The Coast Guard helicopter had been just the beginning. Everything that followed, the investigation, the trap, the systematic destruction of Clyde's life, had been as inevitable as the tides. Dale smiled grimly as he drove through the Baltimore night. Somewhere out there, Clyde McIntyre was learning that some lessons come hard and last forever. And somewhere closer, Dale's son was sleeping safely, knowing that his father would always come when called, would always fight for him, would always make sure that justice was served. That was the only ending that mattered. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.